The Comedy Cellar, live from the table, is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. If you want to support the show and get 20% off your order, head over to sheathunderwear.com/cellar. Code cellar for 20% off your first order. That's sheathunderwear.com/cellar, code cellar. We love them, and we know you're going to love them too. This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Rock Comedy. And wherever you get your podcasts. This is Dan Naturman. Noam is on vacation. He's not with us. We are on Zoom, so theoretically he could be with us, but he's elected not to be with us because he has a lobster dinner that awaits him. I'm here with Periel Aschenbrand, and Adam Muller is with us.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yes, if you notice, my intro was less enthusiastic than normal. It's because we're all doing this by Zoom because the studio wasn't available. Is that the problem, Periel?
It's a long story, but hi, Adam.
Hi.
So let me finish my thought. So we have to do this by Zoom. So I'm in my apartment, which gets very, very echoey, number one. Number two, I'm self-conscious about my neighbors hearing. I'm very against podcasts by Zoom on principle, but here we are. I'll try to make the best.
What do you think your neighbors are going to hear?
I don't want them hearing my podcast. I'm self-conscious because when I'm in the hall, I can hear every fucking thing that they're saying. Every fucking thing I can hear. Is anybody else? Is that just my building? Adam, you say what?
Well, I mean, they can always listen to it after, right? When it comes out. So how is it that different?
But then they're listening to it because they want to, not because they happen to be waiting for the elevator.
Oh,
That's
I see.
That's the nature of living in an apartment in New York City.
Is my building unusual, or when you're in the
hall? No, it's New York City. That's every building is like that, more or less. Can you read?
I don't need them banging on my door and saying, "Hey, get some better guests."
They would definitely, if they hear this one, they definitely will.
But I happen to think Adam's a great guest. That was just a joke.
But why don't you read a little bit of his bio?
Okay, Adam, I'm sorry. I was distracted. Yes, Adam Muller is a New York City-based comedian, former finance professional turned stand-up. He comes to us by way of Toronto, Canada. Yet another Canadian that's making inroads in the New York comedy scene. And he was vice president at Goldman Sachs. Is that am I reading that correctly?
Yep. That is correct.
That's
okay. We have a bit of a, do we have a delay? There seems to be a, what's that? So I don't know what kind of money a vice president makes at Goldman Sachs. But I know Goldman Sachs is a very big deal in the world of finance.
Yeah, I mean, not as much as people think would be how I would answer that.
Not enough to keep somebody away from their dreams, apparently.
No, that's...
Or perhaps so much that they don't need to anymore, and they can just... What's that?
Well, I'm certainly not retired. I made enough that I could, for the first few years of comedy, I could just do comedy. But not enough that I could never that I never needed a real, income stream.
Now, are they hiring at Goldman Sachs? Because I'm looking to make the opposite move from comedy. I've had enough of this.
They might be. I'm not real connected anymore.
There's a position open.
I remember years ago. I went to Wharton. I don't know if you knew that, undergraduate. My grades were very, very bad for certain reasons, and nobody would hire me. But I recall calling up Goldman Sachs and saying, "Hey, I'm in the neighborhood. I try to sell them like I was selling them like a used car. I'm like, I'm in the neighborhood. I thought I could stop by and shake your hand and about job opportunities over there." That's not how they operate. But you have to have a good grade from a good school, which I didn't. So, but in any case. But welcome, Adam is recently passed at the Comedy Cellar, and it was me that recommended him.
Yeah, thank you. But thank you very much. Yeah, I owe you a debt.
Okay, well, I take Venmo.
Okay.
And Zelle.
Gift cards? Do those work?
No, I'd rather just have cash.
Okay.
Or you just give me a Visa gift card, I guess.
Oh, sure.
You don't owe me anything, obviously. I'm happy to do it. When people ask me to recommend them, I typically say yes because it's very awkward to say no.
Mm.
My level of enthusiasm when I recommend somebody will vary. So you got my highest enthusiasm. Not that it matters because Noam will look at the tape and will decide for himself. But how has your experience been thus far?
Well, it's only been a couple of weeks, but it's been a blast so far. I mean, it's so much fun. The rooms all I mean, well, I guess if you include the audition, I've done 3 of the 4 rooms, and they're all great. The crowds are great, the energy's great. So I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity.
Well, as I was saying to you last night, you're not out of the woods. I was telling you, but now I'll tell the listeners. Just because you were passed to work at the club doesn't mean you're not under scrutiny. You'll still be under scrutiny, pretty much forever. If you start not killing, then you'll be bounced out of there. I mean, I still feel
Mm.
that way, and I think it's if I stop doing well, then they'll stop using me. So that's the thing about the cellar is that's why it's not a great club to do new stuff at.
Mhm.
You do new stuff, do maybe one new joke. Unless if you're Chris Rock or Dave Chappelle, obviously you can do whatever you want. But for everybody else, maybe slip one new joke in. But it's not a place I enjoy doing new stuff at.
Yeah, no, it seems like the audition is step 1, and then then you've got and the audition doesn't end with the audition; it continues. That's how I've thought about it, and I'm trying to treat each set like it's just an extension of the audition. And the goal now is to try to stick.
Yeah, and then just do your new shit somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I mean, look, there are new joke shows at several clubs around. I mean, I know the Cellar has one, but also
yeah,
at
the
other
cellar
clubs.
also.
That's a great, when it's a new joke night, that's the if you make use of it, because if something doesn't work, it's okay. I'm a pretty risk averse person when it comes to a paying crowd where you're expected to do well. I don't want to try something that doesn't have a high probability of
Oh, is
success.
that because you're concerned about the crowd not getting their money's worth, or you're concerned about not working at that club again?
Well, I mean, I've always kind of had the attitude that to be aware of the crowd. So wherever I'm at, if I probably know roughly what the tickets cost, and if there's a 2-item or 2-drink minimum, I know what that's going to cost. And if someone's spending upwards of $50 on a Friday or Saturday night to go out and see comedy, even if it's a showcase show and I'm only 1/6 of the comedy they're going to see, I feel like there's an element of there's a job to do, which is to try to be as funny as you can.
Yeah, I think, but as obvious as that sounds to you and me, I don't think every comic feels that way.
Oh no, I definitely don't think. I mean, every once in a while, on a primetime weekend show, I see someone pull out notes on stage, and I just think, oh gosh, you might be funny enough and enough along in your career to get away with that, but I feel like it.
Well, there's 2 categories of people that do that. I mean, if you're Chris Rock, you're going there.
Oh.
They're happy just to see you, and I think they enjoy taking part in the process wherein you're trying out new jokes. But that's Chris Rock. I don't know if that.
Yeah. I'm talking about people far less established or well known than Chris Rock. But yeah,
well, there's also people that believe that I'm going to say my truth and profound truth, and if you don't go along for the ride, that's your problem. That's their attitude. Because some people.
Well, I mean, one of the things I guess I kind of love this about stand up, but it's this weird sort of Venn diagram of like art and craft versus a business, and how you live within those circles is every comic makes different choices on different shows, but there's there are some people that get if you just don't enjoy my art, that's on you. And then there's the other element, which is if they're not laughing, then I haven't done my job. And it's
Yes,
it's
well,
trying to
I'm in the
navigate
latter
those two
category.
things.
I'm in the latter category. Not only haven't I done my job, but I'm worthless as a person.
Well, yeah, then it sticks with you after it. Yeah, for sure.
You know, I've been all week long. I've been just struggling to come up. You know, because we're only as satisfied, many of us, as our newest joke that worked. So all week, the past couple of weeks, I just been fiddling around, and I just with this premise, and it hasn't worked, and I'm infuriated every time I leave the stage. You
Do
know,
you want to workshop it right now?
I don't want to workshop it right now because I don't do that. I don't, because this is too small a sample size.
You never know, though.
And if it doesn't work, you know, it's going to get in my head. And if
Okay.
it does work, it doesn't mean anything anyway because it's only two people. So I can't.
Can we get a little bit more of Adam's story, backstory? Because I think
Well,
this
Adam was born the son of sharecroppers.
I'm serious. This is such a unique
Well, for Adam's Canadian, as I mentioned earlier.
like,
Yes.
that's not the part that I was trying to really dig into. Fascinating as that may
Well,
be.
I'm building up to that.
Okay.
From Toronto.
Yeah, I guess I'd say from two places because I was in high school. I was born in Toronto and then was in Toronto for high school. But between being born and high school, I lived in Western Canada in Alberta. So kind of half my childhood was Calgary and half was Toronto.
And are you an American citizen now?
I'm a dual citizen now.
Okay. And how do you feel about that?
Well, it's funny. I without being overly political, I got my green card in like 2007, and sort of thought that's all I would do because that allows me to be a permanent resident. You know, no one, they can't get kicked out. And then in 2016, there was a change at the top, and I suddenly got concerned. Like, what if some crazy law gets proposed that says we're not green card doesn't necessarily mean you can stay?
Can get deported, can't they?
Well, you're a permanent resident, but it's
I
not.
think you can still get tossed out if you do something really bad.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think if you did something really bad, you just go to an American prison. But in any event, I also wanted, you know, I'd lived here long enough that I also felt like I wanted to be part of the system and be able to vote, which was really why I and you know, once you've had your green card for I think 6 years, you're eligible to apply for citizenship, and I'd had it way longer than that, so I just applied, and it took a couple years to go through the process, and then became a dual citizen. The only negative consequences are tax issues, but other than that, it's fine.
I don't know if I mentioned that my parents are both good.
Yeah,
but they're citizens as well. They were just permanent residents for years, and then they were citizens.
Okay.
Anyway, but Periel's is less interested in your Canadian background and more interested in the fact that you worked at Goldman Sachs for a number of years.
How long did you work there?
I was at Goldman for about 8 years, and then I was at a small hedge fund for about 3 years. And then
this whole time, were you like, what the fuck am I doing? I want to be a comic. Like,
no, for most of this, comedy wasn't on the radar really.
At all?
At all.
You weren't like a funny kid, or you weren't like you didn't grow.
I was very good. Like, I was very good at Goldman in retrospect. I don't think I thought of this at the time, but I was very good at, you know, it's 3 a.m. You're preparing a board presentation to get approval for a $112 billion acquisition, and someone's freaking out because there might be a mistake in the numbers, and you haven't slept in 3 days, so it's almost like being drunk in terms of your ability to think. I was very good at breaking the tension.
Did you hate working there, or it's you know, or you didn't mind it, but you would rather have been doing something else?
I definitely didn't hate it. I didn't mind. I didn't mind it, but also, like, at some weird sort of sadistic level, I enjoyed it. You know, it's sort of it becomes your entire life, but you sort of, if you buy into it, there's a thrill and an excitement to what you're doing. Like, it may seem a little ridiculous to me now, but you get pretty excited when you're doing something that the next morning is going to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, kind of a thing.
I did a show at a guy's, me and Bill Burr. I was opening for Bill Burr.
Oh, wow.
A long time, at somebody's house. We're doing this. This Goldman Sachs guy's wife's 40th birthday party. So she wanted to have a comedy show at their house. Now their house was in Manhattan. It was like a 5-story town. Like this thing was ungodly. Apparently Woody Allen had lived there prior. So his wife was 40. He was probably in his early 40s. Like, what the hell are these guys doing? That they have a house this enormous.
Adam just said $120 billion deals.
Yeah, but Adam doesn't live in a house like that.
No, I do not.
How do you know? Have you been to his house?
I haven't been to his house.
Well, maybe
he's downplaying his
I can remember my first year at Goldman. I was friends with there's classes of associates that all come in together. So I'd become friendly with some people in my class, and one of them was getting married, and so I went to his bachelor party in Vegas, and he'd gone to Harvard Business School, and we're at the bachelor party, and there's a nice dinner at some fancy restaurant, and the dinner didn't end until 1:30 in the morning, and we're walking across the casino floor, and his father, his soon-to-be father-in-law, says, "All right, guys, have a great weekend. I'm going to fly back to New York." And I had sat beside his father-in-law at dinner. We talked for hours, but I had no idea who he was. And then I just kind of blurted out, "What kind of flight leaves at like 2:30 in the morning?" And he gave me this look and he just goes, "My jet," and then walked off. And
was he also a Goldman guy, the father?
No, he was the founder of Blackstone.
Oh, okay.
So he's probably worth $50 billion or something crazy. And I had no idea who he was. And then I felt very, very dumb because I guess you're supposed to know those people, but I wasn't savvy at the time.
So what caused you then to decide to leave that life for stand-up?
Well, so it was a couple of things happened. So I've been at Goldman, and like the one thing about the one of the biggest values of working at Goldman is leaving. Because because it opens a lot of other doors for a lot of people. It's a stepping stone. Like obviously there's a group of people that stick around and move up the pyramid, but it is a system that sort of fires the bottom 10% every year, and there's always new people coming in, and as you get more senior, there's the job changes, and you're less sort of doing the deal analysis, and you're less in the weeds, and you're more of a snake oil salesman a little bit, and I didn't find that as rewarding. And it wasn't comedy at first. I wanted to switch to the other side of the table and be the investor instead of the banker. And I looked around internally, and they offered me an opportunity internally, but I didn't take it because I felt like I wanted to leave. I felt like once you flip that switch, like when you're working 100 hours a week for 8 years, once you decide you might not want to be there anymore, it's very hard to work that hard. And so you kind of that mental switch got flipped, and I kind of had to leave.
What does
no
that
one forced me.
Like, what does that mean? You felt like a snake oil salesman a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, you're going around to companies trying to convince them to buy other companies, or trying to convince them to sell their company. You're a salesman, or salesperson. I don't know.
You may or may not be snake oil, but you're a salesperson.
Yeah, you're a salesman. You're a real estate agent in a sense. And then you've got these other people that are a couple years out of business school that are staying until 4 a.m. to run the numbers for you. And I was great at being the guy that stayed and made the Excel spreadsheet, but I hated ruining someone else's weekend. I found that very, it bugged me when I had to say, no, this has to be done. I need to see this Sunday afternoon. And I know they're going to be they're going to have to do what I used to do, but I didn't like doing that to other people. So it's like, I'm not sure.
You didn't necessarily hate doing it when you were doing it, as you had mentioned.
No, I mean, I missed a lot of life events for a long time, but I kind of enjoyed the process, I guess.
But so you said initially you just wanted to move to the other side of the table. So again, the comedy thing coming.
Yeah. So when I left Goldman, and I had a little time. For the first time, not only did I have a little bit of time before the hedge fund got off the ground, but also I had a little more control over when I was going to work. I was going to work just as hard, but I had a little bit more control over the hours because it's a lot of reading and research type of stuff. And I don't remember why I did it, but I took a comedy class, and it was, standard class, once a week for 6 weeks. It's basically a feedback open mic with your classmates, and then at the end, it's kind of a bringer show. And at the time, the class I took, the show was at Caroline's. It was a lot of fun. And then I did one bringer after that, and then work at the hedge fund took off, and I didn't think about comedy for like another 6 years. That was it.
Wow.
And then I was at the hedge. I'll try to make this quick because I don't know how interesting it is, but I was at the hedge fund for 3 years.
I'll see if my neighbor across the
see what your
hall,
neighbor thinks.
if she's decided not to take the elevator down to listen to your story about hedge funds.
But I kind of got recruited away a little bit to go. There's a large investment manager called PIMCO, which stands for, I think, Pacific Investment Management Company, which is a big fixed income manager, so bonds and stuff.
That's
one of the biggest in the world.
It's an odd name. Sounds like Pimp Co.
It does a little bit. But I mean, at the time I was there, they had something like $1.5 trillion they were managing, just an absurd amount of money. It's hard to even conceive of. And they were trying to build an equity investing business. And a guy I'd worked with at Goldman had ended up there, and he was coming through New York because they're based in Southern California. And he's like, why don't you come work with us? And so I did. I moved to Newport Beach, California for 4 years. And then they decided they didn't want the business that we'd started. So they closed it down. We got severance. And I moved back to New York because that's where all the finance jobs are. And in a weird, I was kind of like it was a weird point because like I'd never had anything career-wise kind of go bad before. And I ended up doing a couple of phone calls with a life coach. And the one thing she said, which stuck to me, was like, if you have a little time right now, do something that you wouldn't otherwise have time to do. And I thought back to that comedy class I'd taken years before. Wow. And the same class still existed. So I just took it again, because you can't look for a job for 15 hours a day. But that was her point. It's like, there's only so many hours a day you can spend looking for a new job. So do something you wouldn't. So I actually took a screenwriting class and a comedy class. And then I started just doing open mics. And before I knew it, without even consciously thinking about it, I'd stopped looking for a job. And once I realized I'd done that, I kind of made a budget for myself and was like, okay, here's 3 years of living expenses. Just do as many open mics as you can and see what happens.
Wow.
And here we are.
And how long ago was that?
That was 2016, 2017 in there.
That's
I think you're a rarity, as most comics, I think, are people that dreamed of it from their childhood. That's my case. So I think you're a rarer person that sort of came, not rare that you started late, but rare that you never even kind of as a kid, did you have any aspirations? Like, they want to be baseball players, or they want to be rock stars, or do you have any?
As a kid, all I cared about was hockey.
You didn't.
Okay. I was a hockey player in Canada. I was in that actually what I think is sort of a tough spot to be in, where you're pretty good but not good enough. So you're just good enough to have the dream, but not good enough for to actually get anywhere. But I really enjoyed it, and it's all I really thought about. So I didn't even really consume that much stand-up. But once I had tried it, like that first few years, especially, like I basically treated my first few years of stand-up the way I treated investment banking. Like I had a schedule. I got up, I was writing, I was watching stuff, I was transcribing late night sets and looking at what the jokes looked like on paper, going out to as many open mics a day as I could, and then, get some sleep and do it again the next day. And I absolutely loved it.
Did you ever have any ambitions, like before you got into finance? Were you like one of those kids that read the Wall Street Journal, or was really fascinated by the world of finance, or it's a way to make money? And I had
this vague notion that I would go into business. Like if you had asked me in high school, what are you going to do with your life? I would have probably said business.
Yeah.
But I was also the kind of kid that would have said the least words possible to get you to leave me alone. I just didn't like sharing, like things that seemed, that I didn't really know. So I had a bit of an aimlessness to me, I suppose. I also feel like I'm one of those people where I like to focus on one thing at a time and put everything into it. So even like that's what banking, maybe that's what investment banking did to me, because that's all you really do.
Just to jump really quickly over to the whole hedge fund thing, I don't know if people know precisely what, it's a term that everybody's heard, but a hedge fund is basically, it's just if you have a lot of money, you give the hedge fund some of your money and they invest it for you. And hopefully they keep a fee, whether they make money or lose money, they get to keep a certain fee, and then hopefully they make money for it.
Yeah, I mean the typical structure, or at least, and I assume it's probably still like this, is it's structured as a limited partnership, which I think can have a maximum of like 99 partners, and typically the which is an investor. So investor is a limited partner, and they put the money in, and you invest it, and you take a small fee on all the money you have, like 1.5–2%. But then the real fun is you take a huge fee on the money you make. So on the return you make, you take like 20% or 15%.
These hedge funds work? I mean, can they beat like just a standard index fund, which just, consistently?
No. I mean, some do, some, but over longer periods of time, it's hard to find data to support that it really works consistently. But there are some people that are very, very good at it.
What's an index fund?
Well, like an index fund is just like I have some money in Vanguard. They just put it in a sort of a diversified portfolio of stock, and they don't take a fee. Maybe they take a fee. They take a small fee.
It's usually very small. It's probably like a 1/10% or something.
They also don't give you any advice. They just,
and it's just right. Usually it represents like a stock market index. Like if the Dow Jones index, you could buy a fund that is just the Dow Jones for a very, very small fee. And then you just sort of own, quote unquote, the market.
We could start a podcast, which is just Adam giving financial advice to comics.
A lot of them need it. I get some weird questions.
You ever hear of a guy named Greg Lipman, by the way? Greg Lipman.
As a comic?
No, he was a hedge fund. I went to school with him.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
And he worked for Deutsche Bank, and one of the characters in The Big Short apparently is based on him. And then now he has
okay.
Whatever.
When you're looking for the most comfortable underwear that's going to cradle your balls and make your package look awesome, Sheath underwear is where it's at. It's the official underwear of comedy. Anybody who's anybody is wearing them. Sheath has 2 pouches. One's for your dick, the other's for your balls. You never realize how awesome it feels to have things separated down there until you give it a shot. Sheath underwear also lasts for years, so you're making a quality investment. I have to tell you that I really am an underwear snob, and I'm very particular about my underwear. And I happen to think that Sheath underwear is so comfortable and so soft, even in this sweltering heat. It really, you really get your money's worth.
Go to sheathunderwear.com/seller or use code seller at checkout to get 20% off your first order. Each order includes Sheath's 100% money back guarantee. Again, for 20% off your first order, sheathunderwear.com/seller or promo code seller at checkout. Get Sheath underwear, support the show, support your balls.
So were you around when that, were you already in comedy when that whole Bernie Madoff thing went down? Or were you still?
When did he get in trouble?
Let's see.
I feel like
he wasn't a hedge fund guy, was he?
Well, he was running. I don't know if it was structured as a hedge fund. It was in some sort of investment management company. But it was, in hindsight, it was so obvious that there was shenanigans going on. Yeah, no, I was still in finance at that point. Yeah.
So what are your goals as a comedian? I mean, are you happy just to make a living at it? And or do you have a desire to be famous? Or
I don't have any I don't have this specific goal of fame. If that's a byproduct of something else, I guess that would be interesting. And I think there's a cost benefit to that. But well, right now, sorry, go ahead.
Well, fame is unfortunately the only way to make any money at this, any real money. If you're famous, you have to be able to put people. In the old days, when I started, the dream was to get a sitcom. That was what people in the 90s and the 80s wanted to get a sitcom. And then you get a big paycheck, and then you become famous, and you can do stand-up or not, but you're going to make money from the sitcom. But I don't know that the traditional sitcom even exists anymore, and they're not giving comedians sitcoms like that. So now the goal is to get 80 billion followers on Instagram and TikTok and sell out theaters. So that's the new thing.
But I don't, and I think I mean, there are people, and we know them who, got successful on social media and got enough of a following that they can go on the road and sell tickets, whether it's theaters or whether it's, club weekends. And that's real money that can add up. That's a good living. And I wouldn't call them famous. I mean, I think they have a fan base, but they're not, I wouldn't call them.
Fame isn't what it used to be. Like you could have 1 million followers on Instagram, which is a lot of people, but it's not the same kind of fame that Seinfeld had, or that even Roseanne Barr had, or Drew Carey, where everybody on planet Earth, or at least in the United States, knew who they were, no matter what age. Like a guy like, I don't know, Chris DiStefano or Andrew Schultz, they have a huge fan base, but my mother doesn't know who they are.
Right.
But my mother did know who Drew Carey was and who Roseanne Barr was, and and they were on the cover. So it's a little bit more segmented.
Yeah, it's become sort of scattered, but in their worlds, they're sort of famous in their world, but because of that, they're able to make a very, very good living, I think.
Right. They can still make tons of money. It's just they don't have the kind of fame that Seinfeld had.
Yeah.
And also Seinfeld's a billionaire, but they don't have the kind of fame that you saw with sitcom stars and
but I try to think of more short-term goals rather than long-term goals, because it's easier to sleep at night that way, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. It also seems like you're very well suited. Like the way that you think about things seems very pragmatic and practical. And so you make these measurable goals and then you put like everything into them. I mean, I suppose if you're accustomed to working 100 hours a week, this is you can probably be successful in anything, right?
I'm wondering if you're going to bounce out of comedy at some point when you decide to make another shift with another life coach gets a hold of you.
I hope not. Yeah, I know, right? That's probably my one thing that I should avoid, just in case. But I don't think so. I think I enjoy it too much. Yeah, I can't imagine. Never say never, right? Like I'm sure there's a lot of people that I'm sure when Eddie Murphy was 23, he said he'd never leave comedy, and look what happened, kind of thing. But or never leave stand up, because obviously he still does comedy. But I can't imagine that happening. It's too much fun.
You're about to be a father, I believe you mentioned.
Yeah, early next year.
Wow, mazel tov.
So
yeah, thanks.
It's a relatively late in life. I don't know how old you are, but
I'll qualify as an old dad, I think, by any metric, for sure. It'll be interesting.
But the good news is you'll get another at least half hour of jokes.
Oh, even the process of getting to this point is ripe for material. Because at this age, it doesn't just happen by accident. It's a science experiment.
So you had to do IVF or whatever?
Yeah.
Is your wife very much younger than you?
No, like a few years, but not. We're both old, and both of our joints make noises in the morning, kind of thing. So,
what are the risks? I mean, did the doctor kind of go over the risks with you in terms of genetic defects or whatever that could happen?
One of the benefits of IVF is because you create the embryos in a lab, you can also genetic test them all and throw out ones that aren't pristine. So there's a little bit that solves for that a little bit.
And these are
it's like Frankenstein, where they're like just like mix it up and just like have at it.
No, there's a lot that goes into it. And she very smartly froze her eggs over a decade ago. So it's they're much younger. They're much younger eggs than.
So you used her frozen eggs.
Yeah. And my current
and your 2023 sperm.
Yes.
And then can they freeze these embryos indefinitely? So theoretically, is born in the year 2300. I mean,
I don't think there's. I mean, once they're in the freezer, however that works.
Yes, they can freeze them indefinitely.
And that's kind of interesting.
The trick is is trying to freeze them where you're going to be, because she actually froze them in California, and when they transported them to New York, they destroyed half of them.
Do they transport them in just a Haagen-Dazs truck?
There's like 2 companies that specialize in transporting frozen eggs, and I guess they didn't do a good job because
And Haagen-Dazs is one of them.
Haagen-Dazs,
exactly.
that's how they make most of their money.
That's really what mint chocolate chip is, but no, don't tell anyone.
Yeah, well, you know,
And I had no idea you were so interested in the process of in vitro fertilization.
You talking to me?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I'm interested in all things science and all things, you know, my interests are varied and wide.
That's true.
It's very wild that the science allows them to do what they can do.
So they parse out all of the bad ones, and then you're left with the best.
Well, there's only so much they can do. Like the obvious defects like Down syndrome, which I hesitate to call a defect because
I was about to
Down
say,
children are lovely people, but that is something that they do look for.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's handled the way that it used to be handled anymore. Specifically with Down syndrome.
But that's something that they can test for. They can't test for autism, for example.
No,
which I've read, but I've read can be more likely with older kids. I don't know if that's true, but
yeah, we'll find out.
All right. Hate to bring everybody down. So did your wife meet you when you were a high flying finance person? And what does she have to say about this career?
No, she's told me that if she met me when I was still at Goldman, she wouldn't have wanted anything to do with me.
Okay, so she met you.
She met me after, yeah.
She met you as a comedian, not as a hedge fund guy.
Sort of at the very a little bit before comedian, but so I was still in finance, but I was on
It's not your life coach, by the way. You didn't marry her.
No. That'd be in the act if that happened.
Well, it can be in the act.
If I married my life coach, she would have told me to stay in finance and keep making money, probably. But no, I was when I was working the tail end of the hedge fund, I think. So we've known each other for a long time. But I wasn't a banker, which was very important, apparently.
But you were in the hedge fund, so she doesn't mind the income hit that you've taken.
No, she's very supportive of it, which is I'm very lucky in that sense, because not a lot of people would like that.
Yeah, I've heard stories of comedians that you know, they married before becoming comedians, and then their spouse was just like, no, you're not doing that. And
yeah,
it ended the marriage.
Really?
No, and she's very. I mean,
well, I know one example in particular, but I'm not going to say who. But it's a fairly well-known comedian.
Well, it's a tough. I mean, it's a tough life.
But he wasn't well known when his wife told him, "Hey, you cut this comedy shit."
Wait, and then she left, and then he became very successful?
Pretty successful, yeah.
And did she try to come back?
Well, I don't know that part of it, but
I mean, that's like the best part.
Well, I don't think so. I think she had moved on. But where did you meet your wife at?
We met the old-fashioned way at a bar in New York.
But that's not. I guess that's the old-fashioned.
It wasn't old-fashioned back then. I guess it'd be old-fashioned now. But no, in real life.
Yeah. Well, well, you have more balls than I do, because I was never good.
Well, I don't, because she came up and started hitting on me. I was just standing in a corner wanting to leave. And she came up to me, and she was a little bit inebriated at the time.
Yeah, the only time I've ever hooked up and or met somebody at a bar was when they came up to me. I
would say, in fact, she was drunk enough that it was actually kind of annoying. And I gave her my number so she would leave.
That is so funny.
And then, and then she texted me, and, the rest is history, I guess. But
well, Periel, back in your, I don't like to use the term slut. It's not a term that I use.
Apparently it is.
But back in days when you were, say,
about town, how's that?
Had a certain,
je ne sais quoi.
A certain, you were coming into your own sexual. Let's just say that, and experimenting with your sexual powers that were substantial at that time, I guess. Did you ever or oftentimes make the first move at a bar?
Yeah, sure.
Is that and that's where you met what's his name?
I don't know.
Philip Roth.
Who's him?
Philip Roth. The
No,
writer.
no, Philip Roth I was introduced to by, I've told you this story, and every time I tell it, you call me pretentious.
I do? No, I don't think so. No, I don't call you pretentious at all. I just wish you had slept with him so the story would have a better ending.
I was trying to sleep with him. I tried to sleep with him, but it didn't work out. Believe me.
You didn't try hard enough, I guess.
I mean, I don't know how hard a person can try, like at a certain point.
But I forgot the story. Did you made out with him or something?
You can, it's in my second book. I encourage you to, it's available on Amazon, On My Knees by Periel Aschenbrand, published by HarperCollins. You can get the book and read it. And there is a chapter in there all about my sexual escapades with Philip Roth.
Okay.
That's a great plug right there.
Thank you.
I feel like that was all set up in advance to plug the book, but
I did. I just texted Dan. I said, ask me about Philip Roth.
So
Dan, you also have a book that's available on.
I do have a book. It's called Iris Spiro Before COVID, Adam.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, but
cool.
it's published by me.
Yeah, that's great.
And Adam, you have two specials, I read.
Yes, both on YouTube, so available for free.
And see, that's something I really admire and I like about when I was reading your bio. It was also what I was saying before, is that like you probably made that happen by yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just decided, like, if you were to ask me, like, and I did I tape a special too early? I would say yes, but I would do it again.
Nobody asked you that though.
Nobody asked me for it, but I also felt like there's sort of a proof of concept that you can do an hour, and having that, having that link in an email to a booker that says, here's just an hour of material. You can go to any point of this and watch how much you can watch it all. You can watch any 2 minutes of it, whatever you want. And I'm
well, when you do the road, I'm in a club. I don't do too many clubs, and I did ask you recently. I asked Adam to send me some clubs because just trying to just get a little bit more into the clubs. But a lot of them, they don't see 100,000 followers on Instagram, they're not interested, so they don't care how funny you are.
Yeah, there's a small subset of clubs that have sort of have cultivated their own audience that trusts them to bring in funny people, and that people just go because they want to laugh. And for someone like me, where I don't sell tickets on the road at this point. So those are the clubs I have to try to find in terms of headlining. In terms of featuring for someone else, well, then they have to worry about being the draw.
But that's the best business model for a club. I mean, the club should all aspire to that business model. Why? Because otherwise they're going to pay the comp. If you're looking for somebody that's going to fill your room, they're going to take all the money. If you just
they're going to take they're going to, and they deserve it. If they're filling the room because of their following, they deserve the door.
Sure. And, but if a club owner, I would want to bring in funny people and eventually get a reputation. It wouldn't happen overnight. You'd probably lose money a year or two. However long it took, you'd be in the black or in the red until you develop the reputation. But then all the money is yours because you don't have to pay the comic that much, because they're not filling the room, you're filling.
Right.
And that's why the seller sells out every show. Part of it is perhaps people think that Chappelle's going to stop by. That's a part of it, but a lot of it is just they just know they're going to get a good show no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think people would keep coming the way that they come with the idea that Chappelle might stop by if it wasn't like at 100%, even if he didn't stop by.
Right. I think maybe they're thinking that's a potential added bonus.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I do think there's also there's also just something cool about being in the room where if he did want to stop by, this is where he would come, even if he doesn't come. If that makes any, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like there's a magic to it because
Right.
the Chappelles and Chris Rocks and that's where they would go. And maybe you get lucky and they drop in while you're there, but even if they don't, like you're in the place where they would, and that there's something very cool about that.
But I also like this idea of like doing things yourself, like making things happen and not waiting for somebody to come to you or having to follow this like prescribed road of like, this is how it works. You know, I think that the idea that you can create it yourself is really empowering.
Yeah, and
Well-
look, there's an element of, as much as we all complain about social media and the algorithms and all this other stuff, and people that get TikTok famous but aren't, that funny but can sell tickets, blah blah blah. It's the reason this avenue exists. So
That's
there is a huge upside to it, even for someone, say like me, that doesn't have a huge following. Where, when I get sick of being brought out into stage as like, you've seen him around town, I can go.
Okay.
I
mean,
go
you can
film
always
my
just
own
lie about
special
it.
and be brought up with the special.
You can
And
always
what
just
are they called?
The first one is called According to Plan, and the second one is called Funny to You.
Available on YouTube.
Available on YouTube.
By the way, you can always just make up a bullshit credit, if
That's
you don't want
true.
to, if you don't want to be introduced but the credits don't really matter. I mean, when people ask me my credits at the clubs in the city, I just say he's a regular here. I mean, they don't give a shit. If I were famous, then you wouldn't need to, give a credit. And if I'm not famous, they don't care anyway. Well, people
So
say,
if you quiz the audience after every set and said what was the person's credit before, they wouldn't. They'd get it wrong most of the time. But
then the standard formulation of giving a credit is you've seen him on. No, they haven't. You've seen him on the Tonight Show. Well, no, they haven't. First of all, I've never done the Tonight Show. Actually, I did do it with Conan. Conan had the Tonight Show for like 6 months in Los Angeles.
Right.
But they haven't seen me on the Tonight Show.
Maybe they have.
Maybe a couple have seen me on America's Got Talent, but even then,
is that the semantics from the host though? Because they could also say he's been on the Tonight Show or he's been on.
But that's just the common formulation. It's the way
you may have you may have seen him on the insert thing.
Yeah,
and I love when they get it wrong. When you say
you may have, they say you've seen him.
Yeah. Well, my favorite is when they ask you for the credit, you say Sirius XM, and then they say you've seen him on Sirius XM, and you're like, huh?
Right.
You may have heard him, but you haven't seen him.
By the way, since speaking of Sirius XM, I mean, they rejected my. I did a tape for them, the Cellar, and they rejected it. They didn't take any of the clips, and I'm kind of mad at them. But I was told it's because the audience wasn't laughing hard.
Ugh.
So I don't know if that's a bullshit excuse or not, but
Well, why don't you just retape it?
well, all right, but I'd like to know if they just don't like the jokes. I don't really feel like doing another taping.
But they just told you why, and you're
No, they didn't tell me. One guy at Sirius says he thinks that's why.
okay.
But they may have only had one person actually listen to it, because I think, from what I understand, they only have like 4 or 5 people.
Play me all the time,
right? They only have a few people that actually listen to everything, right?
I don't know. How.
No. Yeah.
But so I don't know if that's the real reason or not. I guess it matters how big. I mean, but that's the question: is like to what extent does somebody in their car listening to a bit need to hear laughs, or to what extent does an executive need to hear laughs to verify in their own mind that it's funny?
Well, there are rules about that in stand-up. Like, isn't there supposed to be a laugh like every 6
No, but that's another question. Well, there's no rule. I mean, yeah, there should be laughs at a fairly regular interval. There's no particular.
Why wouldn't it be the same? Why wouldn't it
No,
be?
because they're laughing. It's just if they're not laughing as vociferously as they could be, or if it's a small crowd or whatever.
Which could also just be how the sound was captured, right? It's very hard to capture sound properly.
But
I'd say retape it and try to get a hotter room.
Yeah, I'll do that. But but because I'm doing these cartoons, there's a friend of mine that does animation, and I'm like animating my some of my jokes. I'm animating them like Shorty's watching Shorty's back in the old days on Comedy Central. But there's no laughs. It's just me. It's just, you know,
Well,
it's just
if it's
my
animated
jokes
anyway, why
in
not just put in a
form.
laugh track?
Yeah, why don't you put in a laugh track?
Yeah, I guess you could, but I'm wondering to what extent on Instagram and TikTok, not having the laughs or having the laughs would influence how people perceive the joke, how funny the joke is to them. You know,
Are
The
you
Simpsons doesn't have a
asking-
laugh. The Simpsons doesn't have a laugh track. I don't think. I kind of gave up on The Simpsons like 10 years ago, but they didn't have a laugh track, do they?
I don't. I'd have to watch one. I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, they don't.
They don't. Okay. Hey, Max, you decided to chime in. How are you?
I'm good.
Max, how are you enjoying the discussion? I look to you because you're like an everyman. You're like a run-of-the-mill Joe.
Yeah. It's no, it's good. It's interesting. I've known Adam for years, but I didn't know so much about. I knew he was in finance, but I didn't know the details. So yeah, it's been interesting.
I think that it's important to have a laugh track, Dan. I think it adds a little bit of like sparkle to it.
Yeah, it might, you know.
Try it. Put a
I-
laugh track in one and see and do a test.
I mean, laughter is contagious, so
Yes.
it does make a difference. But like I said, I mean, The Simpsons never had it, and I don't think Family Guy or anything. So I think the Flintstones, I think, did have a laugh track.
Family Guy, by
Mark,
the way.
Max, do you have anything to say about the Flintstones?
No, I don't know about the Flintstones as well as.
That's an old
So
reference.
before his time.
It's
Wasn't even
before my
born
time
yet.
too. I still watched it in syndication.
No,
Shows are timeless.
the Flintstones weren't, no.
Yeah, they used a laugh track.
Okay, thank you, Max, for your research. But
Have you watched Family Guy? Have you seen Family Guy?
Yeah, I've seen. I mean, I'm not like a devoted, but I've seen, you know, a lot of
Okay,
episodes.
well, I just started seeing it in the past like 6 months or whatever, because my son watches it.
Ah.
And that show is, first of all, so wildly inappropriate and so smart.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I don't think it's smarter than The Simpsons. I think it's at that level. I think they're both roughly
I never really watched the
same level. You never watched them. Max, what are the kids your age? Well, how old are you? In your 20s?
Oh yeah, I'm 29.
So did you watch like in syndication older shows growing up, like the Cheers, for example, or
I watched some Cheers on when it got put on streaming, but I watched Family Guy and The Simpsons and all those shows growing up.
what about Seinfeld?
I watched a lot of Seinfeld.
And that would have been in syndication.
Yeah.
That would have been.
I think streaming brought a lot of those old shows. Like
Yeah.
streaming decided that who was going to get to see what old shows, you know? Like there's a whole generation of people that would never have even seen Friends if it hadn't ended up streaming.
I never
Or
saw.
Seinfeld.
Yeah, somebody was just telling me that's actually that Who's the Boss is big now among like
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that's true.
That was a great show. I loved that show when I was a kid.
I mean, but you were a kid.
That's the Tony Danza
Yeah,
show?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
Tony
yeah.
Alyssa Milano and
Judith Light.
Judith Light. Yeah, yeah.
I
Wow.
never watched Friends. I found it totally unwatchable. I couldn't even get through one full episode of it.
I've never seen a full episode of Friends. Not because it's unwatchable. I just never watched it. I just never. I never watched it. But Degrassi Junior High, Adam. Any thoughts?
It's funny, as a Canadian, I feel like I should have watched all of those, and I know what it is, and I've seen a few here and there, but I was never really like into it.
I'd be so infuriated. I'd go to my grandmother's house in Montreal, and she had like 3 channels or 4 channels, whatever it was, and half of them were in French.
Of course.
And I'd be so infuriated because I would be, oh, the Flintstones, because Flintstones, what I was saying that was one of my favorite shows, and I would be turning the channel, and I would see the Flintstones, and then Fred would start talking French, and then I'd just be so infuriated.
Well, is that why you decided to teach yourself French?
No, I decided to teach myself French because at the time I was spending a lot of time at the bookstore to avoid my roommate. Not because I didn't like my roommate, but when you live in a small apartment with a roommate, like you need to be away. So I would just spend a lot of time in the bookstore, and I just saw a book said French the Fast and Fun Way or whatever it was called, and I picked it up. And in high school I never was interested in languages. And I took Spanish, but I hated it. And then for some reason, as an adult, I really enjoyed studying it. I don't know why. I don't know what changed. And I just kept studying. And then 20 years later, I'm still studying.
And you're like fluent in it.
Well, I mean, fluent is a word, by the way, that has no meaning. It's literally no meaning.
What do you mean it has no meaning? Of course it has a meaning.
It really doesn't. If you like, what is fluency? Is it native fluency? No.
No, that's native fluency is native fluency.
Well,
That's
fluency, then what is fluency?
I mean,
How would you define it?
Define the word fluent.
I can't, because it has no definition.
Okay, listen to me carefully. What you're saying,
people just use the word fluent in different ways and in different contexts, but there's no standard definition of what that really is.
no, that's ridiculous. Dictionary definition, Oxford Dictionary.
Well, okay,
fluent, to be able to express oneself easily and articulately. That's not the same as native fluency.
So it sounds like there's a lot of Americans that only speak English that aren't fluent in English.
That's probably
the articulately part, really.
Yeah, the articulately part is tricky.
I mean, you're fluent in French. You can sustain a high level.
I can say what I need to say with reasonable articulateness and express
and perform stand up.
Well, I have performed stand up in French. It's quite challenging.
That's very impressive.
It is very impressive.
Yeah.
But it's quite, but the words don't just spill out of my mouth.
That's not part of the definition.
Well, in any case. And you could also be like fluent in certain topics, but like if I talk about sports, I might find there's a lot of vocabulary that I don't have. So I don't know how exactly to define my level of French, but I can express most of the things I need to express.
You could say I'm fairly fluent.
Yeah, but I wouldn't use the word fluent.
God help me. Okay.
Because again, it doesn't get us anywhere.
But also, what's fair,
Well, you had to take French in school because you're from Canada, so it was
I took French all through high school, and then I took a couple years in college. I was never very good at languages. More of a numbers guy.
I think that's a myth. I think that the idea of being good at languages.
Really?
I think it all depends how bad you want to learn the language. If I've studying French for 20 years and going at it I don't think I'm good at languages. I think that I'm a smart guy, I mean, I remember vocabulary better than the average person, I think. But I don't know if anybody's really, there might be some, like there's this one guy, Daniel Tammet, he's like autistic. He's a high functioning autistic guy. And like, he memorized pi to like 10,000 places.
Wow.
And he and so he might be, and they challenged him to like learn Icelandic in 2 weeks for an interview, and he did it. So, he might thought it's good at language. I think it's just, you just didn't want to learn it that much. You didn't like it.
No, of course there are people who are good at languages and people who are less good at language.
There's smarter people and less smart people, and smart people are better at learning vocabulary and grammar because
I'm much better at language than I am at math. Like I can learn, like I've learned other languages, or like I've lived in other countries and become conversational in other languages. And I'm, like I score much higher in language-based tests as a kid and a teenager.
I think that's just general intelligence. I don't think there's any special language intelligence.
It's an interesting idea. I never thought about it before, but there is an interesting idea that there's an element of aptitude which is just desire. If you really want to know something, you might have more aptitude in it than if you just don't care.
I think
it's mostly desire and exposure. I mean, if you're immersed, that's obviously bring you
if I had to move to some small town in France where they only spoke French and live there the rest of my life, I'm sure I would pick it up over time. Because you'd have to. You'd have to.
100% would. I lived in Thailand for a year and became conversational in like basic Thai.
Okay.
I speak a word of it but you had to learn it to function. Okay, let's say goodbye. I need to actually sign off. But
okay, thank you, Adam Muller. You can find him on YouTube. He's got 2 specials, not 1, but 2. It's Funny to You, and there was another one. I forgot.
According to plan.
According to plan.
Yeah.
And you seem like a kind of guy that plans.
Well, the idea of the first one is it's my life has not gone according to plan. That's but that's okay. It's more interesting.
You revised your plan, and it's going to the revised plan.
Yeah. We're on plan B.
Yeah, but plan B implies that it's a lesser plan, that it's something that you did because plan A didn't work out. But that's not the case with you. Okay, you did work out. You were at Goldman Sachs. You were at a hedge fund. And then you decided to do something.
So it's plan A prime. How's that?
Well, okay, fine. Thank you, Adam Muller, Periel, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. A huge thanks to Sheath Underwear for sponsoring the show. Don't forget to head to sheathunderwear.com/seller and use code SELLER today to get 20% off your first order. Your balls will seriously thank you.